players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most revered in the history of Magic the Gathering. Entomb, Dark Ritual, Reanimate, and many others. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind Bosch and Roll on YouTube, Arabian University, and theepicstorm.com. This episode is sponsored by Moxfield and financial advisor and certified financial planner Nicholas Robb.
Hello, and welcome to episode 149 of the Eternal Glory podcast, Legacy's New Standard. We've already recorded 30 minutes of introduction and banter for the week, available in our supporter exclusive pre-show. Check out patreon.com/eternalglory to gain access, or join as a YouTube member for the same content instead. As always, I'm Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben U.
Where's Brian?
Brian will not be joining us tonight. Brian, unfortunately, is in the middle of a pretty big storm and is out of power, so we are pressing on without him. So instead, I am only joined by...
Bryant Cook of the Epic Storm. My fault, everyone. Sorry about that. You can join our pre-show where you get to find out the battle that I won against my wife with members like Vinicius, Lily P, Wallowped, Lucas Fox, Renoir, and Adam S. Not to mention Mox with a Z at the end. And I'm going to butcher this: Kaiko C, Octavio R, Dustin H, and Ferns the Fern.
I'm guessing it's Kioske 14.
Sure, yeah.
I have spent enough time watching Japanese stuff that I think I've got the gist of that one. Anyway, to win in Magic, adjust your strategy as the game changes. The same is true of investments. Nicholas Robb, financial advisor and certified financial planner, can help you create a game plan for your financial goals. Call 314-968-3783 or email nicholasropp@edwardjones.com. That's nicholas.raupp@edwardjones.com to get started today. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
If you're interested into advertising to 10,000 plus Eternal gamers every episode, reach out to us. We're always accepting new sponsors. Also, everyone, 2 episodes ago, we were pulling for everyone to listen on Spotify. Listen wherever you want. Your preferred podcast feed will do just fine, but we appreciate everyone trying out the Spotify thing while it lasted.
Okay, so today's episode is going to have 2 parts. First, we're going to take a look at the newest metagame trends. We've got some changes since the last episode. And then we are going to specifically call out standard legal cards in Legacy, taking a look at some of the cards from the last year or so to see what is actually sticking in Legacy. I know there's this idea that these powerful summer sets are dominating Legacy and pushing a lot of cards into Legacy, but as you will probably see later this episode, there's a lot of standard legal stuff that's actually doing quite a bit of work.
Yeah, and Phil, I don't know about you, but every once in a while I'll see posts that are like, we need to try Heritage Legacy again, no Modern Horizons, no this. Honestly, I've done that stuff. I love playing with the Modern Horizons cards and all those overpowered things. Sometimes some things cross the line, we can get rid of them, but for the most part, I do think that they make Legacy better. More interaction is a good thing.
And we had a whole episode on that. It's probably close to 2 years ago now at this point, where our podcast conclusion was that generally speaking, we are thumbs up towards these sets that they have, these summer sets that they have done more positive than negative. Although there might have been a few outliers in the sets that were a bit pushed, and maybe the hammer had to come down on a few of them.
Yeah, so why don't we just, hop on into the meat and potatoes of the set. What are the current new meta trends of Legacy, Phil?
So, Oops All Spells is on the rise. If we look at the last 7 days specifically, it is 10% of the format. 10.
What? I thought it wasn't even that good and it didn't need to be hit. That's crazy. Oops, it's broken.
When's June? Is June now? Oh, it's not May yet? Uh-oh.
Yeah, rip.
If we look at a slightly larger time span, if we look at the 14-day metagame breakdown, Oops is down to about 8.5%, 8.3%, technically speaking. So this is a deck that we predicted was going to be a problem if not addressed. And the initial, well, maybe not initial, we're a couple weeks past the banning at this point, and it is putting up results. You're going to see it in leagues. You're going to see it in challenges.
I think one thing that happened is the initial banning happens, and we had a whole episode on what to expect with people playing larger spells again, but now the dust has settled, and it's pretty clear that Oops All Spells is the king of the hill, and it's going to knock off whatever tries to beat it. It's too good. It has Thoughtseize, Pact of Negation, all of these sideboard jukes. It's really good at pretty much everything, and it's all because of the MDFC lands. In my opinion, they were a gigantic mistake in Magic design, but there's no real fixing them at this point. And I know that you'll see posts on Twitter that are like, well, what if you just make the back half count as a land? Okay, well, what happens now when you crop rotation into Seagate Restoration? 1 green, draw 7. Like you can't. There's no rules fix for this. Like, that's the problem. There's no elegant way to do this. So I think MDFCs are here to stay, and the ruling on them, or the way that they're built, is honestly just terrible. And I think it's something that Magic is going to have to deal with for a long time, unless things like Undercity Informer or Goblin Charbelcher don't exist anymore.
So we've had multiple waves of rule-related issues with split cards and double-faced cards, with things like Cascade coming to mind as being problematic. So this is not a one-time Magic design problem. We've had a lot of rules changes, even just since I've been playing, since like Scars of Mirrodin, where a lot of those rules have changed multiple times, where the mana values of these cards in different zones has changed. It's a tough problem from the rules perspective, I think.
Oh, I would agree. Cascade had actually 2 of them. There was first where these split cards you could cascade into Boom Bust, where they looked at Boom, but then you got to cast Bust for 6 mana, which made no sense. And then Velki, you could cast the back half, which also didn't make any sense. So I'm glad they fixed Cascade, but I think the MDFCs are just a little bit of a tougher solve.
Yeah, and with Oops All Spells specifically, I am finding that I will often stop plan A and even stop a plan B, and then 3/1 Poxwalkers, 3/1 Boggart Trawler, like those creatures can just be cast. Your opponent can just have a 4-mana Doomblade that gets your blocker out of the way. When you have to sideboard so many cards to try to stop the primary combo, your deck gets worse at dealing with just random 3/1 creatures. And it is proving very problematic to consistently beat this deck.
There's also Rotting Regisaur, but they can protect these things too with Thoughtseize and Unmask Cabal Therapy. It's not like, oh, well, your deck couldn't handle a 3/1. It's like, well, it could. It's just that the Oops deck also has a lot of interaction.
And some of these decks will even play some of the jukes in game 1. I have seen some of these Oop decks just play a game 1 Goblin Charbelcher. And like, that is just something that is there. You will probably see it. And then you have to think, okay, am I beating this Charbelcher? Are there more Charbelchers coming? Are there Goyfs? Are there Rotting Regisaurs? I've seen Dalthy Voidwalkers, and it was another black 2 or 3 mana creature that could bring some other stuff back from the graveyard. There's green builds with Disciple of Freyalise and piles of Force of Vigors. Oops is not a monolith, and that gives the Oops players a massive advantage.
Yeah, not knowing how they're sideboarding is honestly such an advantage for them, because there's also lists that are just Dimir, where they sideboard in a bunch of Thassa's Oracles, and then the graveyard hate doesn't matter because their game plan is to just cast a Thassa's Oracle. Or there's lists that play things like Conjurer's Bauble, so that way when you go to Surgical Extraction, Thassa's Oracle, or Dread Return, they just put it on top. So there's ways to beat Grafdigger's Cage with things like Conjurer's Bauble. And if you're not familiar with Conjurer's Bauble, it's a 1-mana artifact from Fifth Dawn where you can tap and sacrifice it to put target card from a graveyard on the bottom of the owner's library, and then you draw a card. So there's a lot of cool tech in these Oops builds to just naturally beat hate. And I think that's one thing that I've read on like Reddit and, Discord and all these other places, they're like, it's a graveyard combo deck. Just beat it. Okay, well, I now know that you haven't played Magic in over a year, because if just beating it was that easy, it wouldn't be the best deck. Like, I can't think of the last time that a graveyard combo deck. Okay, people are gonna not like when I say it that way because they're gonna be like, "Oh, to be a Reanimator was 6 months ago." But like an actual dedicated graveyard combo deck like this, like Oops All Spells or Dredge or whatever, was the best thing that you could be doing. Yes, Reanimator is a graveyard combo deck, but it's not all in the way that this deck is all in.
Yeah, I agree. This is like the Dredge deck that can ignore your Rest in Peace or your Leyline of the Void, right? It feels a little icky when you have the Haymaker against their deck, and you might even have 2 Haymakers, and you still handily lose, sometimes on like turn 3.
Yeah, exactly. So, Phil, if you're okay with moving on just a little bit and going back to what I talked about with the dust settling, can we talk about Dimir Reanimator?
Yeah, this is sort of a weird one because Reanimator fell off the face of the earth for, I don't know, 2 weeks or a month. People were trying, air quotes, bad builds of it at first, trying to force things like Oliphant and Generous Ent into the deck to try to keep it playing the same. And that just didn't really work out. So people went to traditional blue-black tempo shells and had a decent amount of success with it. And now it's starting to creep back in.
Yeah, so I mean, if you remember last episode, there was a little bit of gloating about Troll of Khazad-dûm being the correct hit, and I was like, I'm still not sure. Let's see how things play out. Like, I wasn't convinced that it was the right hit, and there were some people tagging me on Discord like, LOL, you thought that Entomb was the problem. And now Dimir Reanimator is just back. We're seeing Oculus in the deck. We're seeing builds with more Orcish Bowmasters and Tamios. Like, they're leaning a little bit more into the tempo side, but they still have that incredibly strong Reanimate into Archon of Cruelty or Atraxa Grand Unifier. So it's more of a tempo deck that has an incredibly good top end right now. Like, they're only playing 1 Animate dead, or at least the first couple lists I've clicked on are, but they still have the 4 Reanimate. And I don't think that this is going anywhere. Like, the Dimir tempo deck is still there. This looks a lot like the Dimir tempo deck. It's built to beat the other tempo decks in the format by having that really powerful top end.
Yeah, this is the mid-range wars all over again, right? Like one of the episodes that we harken back to a lot, where something becomes good and established, and that is the blue-black tempo shell. And so to win in the mirrors, you go just a little bit bigger or you go a little more unfair than the other people. And having the ability to, oops, I got an Archon of Cruelty, probably is better than the person who is just maxing out on Tamios and Bowmasters.
I would have to agree with that. So Dimir Reanimator is making a big comeback. If you look at the last 7 days, it's 4.5%. And if you look at the last 14 days, it's 4.8%, which seems small compared to Oops All Spells, but that's still a top 5 deck in Legacy. And I think that's substantial because, 5% isn't much. But when you compare it to a deck like Izzet Delver that's under 4%, you go, oh, okay. Izzet Delver's an established deck that I, respect. Well, it's doing better than established archetypes in Legacy. And I think that is significant. So Reanimator is back. And if you combine all the Reanimator decks together, so Dimir, Rakdos, and Mono Black, and you might be saying Mono Black, yeah, Mono Black is putting up big numbers too. It's like over 2% of the field. It's just under Izzet Delver. So if you combine them all together, almost 11% in the last week, and over the past 14 days, just under 10%. So the Reanimator, shell is, roughly 1/10 of the format. That's incredible.
So talking about the Mono Black Reanimator deck, because a lot of people might not be super familiar with that one, a lot of times we will call it Mono Black Reanimator, but it actually has green cards in the sideboard. So traditionally in game 1, this is looking to be a fast combo deck, often playing things like Unmask and even Shallow Grave to just kind of get in there as quickly as possible. And then in the post-sideboard games, they will play something like 4 Chain of Smog, 4 Witherbloom Apprentice, 3 or 4 copies of Spoils of the Vault to find them and maybe something like Douthie Voidwalker or some Goyfs or something to give you a fair beatdown plan as well. So you do the same thing that Oops is trying to do, where, okay, I need Graveyard Hate to beat this person. Oh no, Chain of Smog combo.
Yeah, exactly. There is a light green splash. I really liked initially when this build came around because it was playing Worldly Tutor with the Surveil lands like Underground Mortuary as a build your own Entomb. And then Graveyard Hate became so problematic that they had to ditch the Worldly Tutor package. So I liked the build your own Entomb that they were doing, but unfortunately it's gone away while Graveyard Hate is at a high because the Worldly Tutors found your post-board game plan of Witherbloom Apprentice, which really helped with the juke. But it's just tough to justify when you're seeing so much main deck Graveyard Hate due to Oops All spells.
Yeah, and on that note, I'm looking at the 5-1 challenge list from April 16th. That version of this mono black Reanimator deck has 2 Fairy Macabres in the main deck, 4 Douthie Voidwalkers in the sideboard. Like, that is a very strong statement of the graveyard matters right now.
Yeah, and the person that you're discussing, the Shallow Grave, also their name is literally what they're playing, Shallow Grave. They were the trophy leader last season, so it's not like this person accidentally top-8'd with a deck with 2 main deck Fairy Macabre. Like, this person knew what they were doing, and they know how to beat Oops All spells, which is apparently having to have both Fairy Macabre and additional sideboard hate.
So also on the rise is Cephalid Breakfast, and specifically I do mean the Nadu Breakfast version. So some of the mid-range stuff was outperforming it for a little while, but we see once again another graveyard-oriented combo deck, wink wink nudge nudge, what is important in Legacy right now, rising to the top. Or I guess alternatively, you could view it as another Thassa's Oracle deck rising to the top. Take your pick.
Yeah, one of the comments on our last episode was like, why won't these guys just already say ban Thassa's Oracle? It's because I don't think banning Oracle is actually the correct thing. Like, Oops All Spells has a myriad of other selections they can make, so you'd really hurt Cephalid Breakfast and Doomsday, but Oops All Spells would just play Lotleth Giant, or they could even go back to playing some other series of cards that used to see play. Like, there used to be a really bad win with like Angel of Glory's Rise, but you want a win condition that's extremely compact, and that's what Lotleth Giant is. So I'm not sure that hitting Thassa's Oracle is actually correct for Legacy.
So something we saw with a couple of ban waves is a problematic card was taken out, and then some other deck took a ton of splash damage. Going back many years at this point, Sensei's Divining Top pretty clearly needed to go to knock Miracles down a peg at the time, but there were other decks playing that to great effect. It was colorless selection for decks like Nick Fit. It did some really, really cool things with Goblin Welder in Painter. And I think if you take out Thassa's Oracle from the format, you completely kill some other decks, like the mono blue Paradigm Shift deck that people like to mess around with from time to time.
Yeah, I get that. Plus, like the 2, fairly popular decks with Cephalid Breakfast and Doomsday.
Yup. That would be a big, big hit to combo. And a lot of combo.
The big thing about the Breakfast decks now, and I mean, I faced Breakfast earlier today where I had Leyline of the Void in play. I didn't know that they were on Breakfast, by the way, going into game 2. I just knew that my opponent was a graveyard combo gamer. And it turns out they were playing Breakfast. And they just went, turn 1 Shuko, turn 3 Nadu, and buried me in card advantage, and I never stood a chance. So Nadu, it meant that this all-in combo deck just has a natural way built in to beat Graveyard Hate. So that's what these decks are trying to do these days. It's, well, okay, you have tons of Graveyard Hate because of Oops All Spells and Reanimator. Well, you have to have a plan B. And for Oops All Spells, Reanimator, this Cephalid Breakfast deck, they each have a super good way of beating Graveyard Hate. It's a juke that doesn't feel like a juke because it's so good.
Yeah. On my channel, when I'm recording videos, I now just treat my opponents as when they assemble Nadu and Nomads in Core, or Nadu and Shuko, it's like, okay, they won, next game. I'm personally kind of done trying to struggle through the fair card advantage aspects, because even if your deck just has like a few prismatic endings, spell pierces, days, swords, force of will, being able to draw, air quotes, draw 6 to 12 extra cards in an entire turn cycle, you don't tend to beat that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty good with just picking it up. Like, my opponent got to do their thing. I'm not going to win. Like, I don't just sit there and let them slowly card advantage me to death. I value my time here on this planet.
Yeah, I tried to put on the fair fight for a while, but now unless I've got like lethal on board and it's like, okay, you got to stop me or I win. I'm moving to the next round.
That's fair. So, Phil, I'd like to move a little bit forward and talk about a deck that I was convinced was going to be a top deck in Legacy that has since fallen.
Show and tell, right?
OmniTell.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was what I thought was a clear winner. It didn't have anything hit, it just gained stock up, and then it gained Mist Vale or Mesmerized Village. And I was like, there's no stopping this deck. Like, it just gained everything. Well, when you look over the results of the first, month of the format, OmniTell's just done nothing but fall. And I don't have a good reason why. Stock up is incredible. They just gained this new powerful land that means that the Delver decks can't counter their payoff, which is what they care about. But the deck just can't seem to win. And when I played the OmniTell list that had Mistrized Village in it, I got stomped by Dimir Tempo, and it wasn't particularly close. And then I did beat a Delver deck, but it felt like I got a little lucky. And even with Carpet of Flowers, OmniTell struggles. So I think with all the Tempo decks coming back into the format, with Reanimator taking a hit, Dimir Reanimator taking a hit, OmniTell ended up being a big loser. And if you follow other creators online, there is some for lack of a better word, complaining about the rise of Tempo, because Tempo decks are currently over 20% of the format if you combine them all together. And I mean, that's Dimir Tempo, Temur Delver, Grixis Delver, Izzet Delver, all the other assorted flavors you can think of. But if you combine them all together, it's roughly 20%. And 20% Tempo is not good for your OmniTell deck, especially if you're trying to then make your combo cost 2 more for the Mistrized Village. So large combo ended up being a loser. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have two things. Number one, I want to start with the Tempo and then loop back to OmniTell. What you just had to say there was if you combine these 4 or 5 different Tempo decks together, they're 20% of the format. I, generally speaking, think that Legacy is in some ways in an okay place if there's not one de facto best Delver deck or best Tempo deck. Like, you've got people playing Dimir, you've got people playing Temur, you've got people playing Grixis and Izzet. Like, there are a ton of different options for how you approach Tempo right now instead of one monolithic Tempo deck. That gets a thumbs up from me. I like that as a sign of format health.
So I'm going to play, and I hate doing this, but a little bit of devil's advocate here, because I feel like when people play devil's advocate, they're often just being a giant asshole. That is not what I'm trying to do here. But we were previously talking about Reanimator, where if you combined it, it was over 10% of the field. A lot of people seem to, not like when we're like, oh, Delver's fine at 20%, but Reanimator isn't. And that's not necessarily what we're saying. We're saying that Dimir Reanimator is now a top 5 deck again. And if you thought it was dead, it isn't. It might even still end up being the best thing you can do in another month or so. But right now, we're just saying that all of the different flavors of Delver, it's nice to see, because when Delver's pushed, it often eliminates all the other variants that you could play. And right now, having a handful of different Delver decks you can play is a good sign that the format is healthy, outside of, oops, all spells.
Yeah, and as far as Dimir Reanimator goes, it's an it's back moment, but in terms of raw numbers, it's like 12th in the format in the last 30 days. Let me switch to the 7-day view. In the 7-day view, it is picking up, and it's at about 5th most played.
Yeah, so it's been gaining.
Looping back to the OmniTell stuff, this was a deck that I really was expecting to be good, and it can do some very powerful things. I have won some games to it. I have lost some games to it. There was about a week-long period where I was putting, a blanket on the name, white, black, and a bunch of mana, exile permanents when it enters.
Archon of, what's it called?
Oh, geez.
I have a Japanese foil one. I should know this, Phil. If only I could read it. Ashen Rider.
Ashen Rider, there we go. Yeah, where I was putting Ashen Riders in the sideboard because Show and Tell was just everywhere in my leagues. And now I am viewing it more as this is a powerful stock up deck that I will face from time to time, rather than this is one of the key cards, one of the key decks that I am gunning for as I am constructing decks. Like that fell off in the course of 1 week of recording.
Yeah, and the big thing with OmniTell is I think it's good when you think decks are going to be good, and then the rest of the metagame goes, oh yeah? And then it shifts, and that deck gets knocked down a peg. That is a good sign for Legacy to me. What the problem is that the metagame is 20% tempo decks, which are decks that should be really good against the all-in combo deck, and then the all-in combo deck just goes, LOL, yeah right, I'm still top dog. I think that's when you start to question, like, oh, okay, Oops All Spells might be better than we thought.
All right. Do you have any other metagame thoughts here before we proceed into the next section?
I don't.
All right. Then I just want to say, if you are interested in any of the decks that we have been playing on our personal channels, remember you can always find them on our Mox fields. All three of us, Brian included, who is hopefully not, outside trying to fix his power personally. All three of us have our own Mox fields, and you can check out what we've been playing, including all the new hot tech.
I'm going to do a quick personal thing here. Phil, I had not one but two modern 5-0s this week with Mono Red Belcher and Giftstorm, the deck from 2017 that I've posted my deck list to Moxfield. The video isn't even live, and these deck lists have hundreds of views. So if you want to see my sweet 5-0 lists, go check them out on Moxfield.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then let's go into standard legal cards in Legacy. Welcome back. So now we want to take a look at what new cards are actually holding up. And specifically, we're going to try to take a look at things that came through standard. And we'll cheat a couple of times because there are some supplementary commander sets that are coming out alongside of these, or some things like Foundations, Jumpstart. We'll address those cards too. But recent printings that are good in Legacy. Bryant, where do you want to start?
Why don't we start with Abhorrent Oculus? It's seeing play in some of these new Reanimator decks, and I say new being the Dimir one. So you wonder what happened, what are people playing in order to, make Dimir Reanimator come back? The Oculus is actually kind of modern tech. If you look at the Dimir Frogtide there, people are using Unearth in order to get back the Oculus to cheat the exile 6 cards from your graveyard clause. Well, in Legacy, you can Entomb for an Oculus, which is a 5/5 flyer that then makes more 2/2 creatures. And then they're like, oh, this only costs 3 life for Reanimate. That is crazy that you get a flying 5/5 that makes more creatures. So it's essentially Grave Titan that you can cast for 2 and a blue, and it only costs 3 life to Reanimate.
When you said that was Grave Titan, my brain at first went, no, that's not true. And then I started thinking about it. And honestly, it does feel a lot like that. If you haven't played with this card personally, you might not understand how good the Manifest Dread is. It continues to fuel your graveyard, and occasionally you will just hit something dumb just by randomly spiking one of the top 2 cards being, a Bowmaster or an Atraxa or an Archon. If you're playing it in other decks, sometimes it's a Ketramos or a Dreadnought or something like that. It is surprisingly strong. And the first time you flip an Oculus with your Oculus and you get the second one and you start getting 2 cards per turn cycles, boy, you're going to remember that moment because it feels good.
In the previous modern format, I was playing a lot of the Grinding Breach deck, where, believe it or not, Phil, I did some attacking. Yeah, Bryant Cook attacks. You might not believe me, but it's true. And with my construct tokens, I found that Oculus alone just stalls out the game long enough for Oculus to kill you, even when you're attacking with some beefy constructs. And you're thinking, okay, yeah, my constructs are going to get the job done, they're a Reanimate deck. Just the Manifest Dread making blockers every turn, you never really get there. And in the meantime, they have a 5/5 flyer. So this thing plays defense while also hitting you for 5 in the air.
Yeah, and that defense part is really important in the format right now. There are so many people trying to just attack in with 0/3 Tamios, just assuming that is going to be safe to do. And if you have a 5/5 flyer sitting there, your opponent can't just accumulate their clues every turn. Their Dragon's Rage channelers that have to attack into it are going to feel pretty bad. I have won and lost quite a few games where the Oculus has gotten into play and the board stall just more and more favors the Oculus player over time.
I believe that if Brian Coval were here, he'd be a little sad if we didn't mention the fact that you can manifest Dread and then sneak a Phyrexian Dreadnought into play. I mean, I know Brian's not here, but in the spirit of the podcast, I just feel like I have to say something.
Oh yeah, I have absolutely done that. It feels dirty, and like it's such a not telegraphed thing. Like you just attack in with a 2/2. Your opponent's attention is on the 5/5 flyer. No blocks, take 12 for 1 mana. It is a brutal life swing, and even if your opponent then answers the Dreadnought on the following turn, at that point the Oculus just kills them in the air.
That is impressive.
It feels nice. So, where are we settling on Kaito Bane of Nightmares? Is this just full-on legacy staple? Is this flex slot? What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's the real deal. And we were talking about the other Dimir deck. Now we're talking about Dimir Tempo. So this is not Reanimator. At least I haven't seen Kaito in Reanimator personally. But when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's cute, a 4-mana Planeswalker. Well, it's really 3 mana with the Nijitsu. And fun fact for you, it's hexproof. I did not realize that my first couple times playing the Kaito because I'm not the guy trying to kill creatures. And then I was playing a deck that was more interactive and I just went, what the F? I couldn't believe that it was hexproof. It feels so unfair. And then the +1, it makes all your other ninjas bigger if for some reason you're playing actual ninjas in Legacy. But the 0 mana ability is what I think is egregious. So you have a 3/4 hexproof for 3 mana that then accumulates card advantage. Okay, well that seems like it's on par with Legacy, right? But the fact that you get to surveil 2 and then draw a card, that is nuts. And oftentimes you want the surveil 2 to beef up your Murktide region, or, put cards in the graveyard if you were a Reanimate strategy. Yeah, you might be someone who has, trying to fill up your graveyard for the Oculus that we just described. So the Surveil 2 is quite good. And then the final, thing on Kaito, if you're unfamiliar, is you can negative the Kaito and tap down a creature with the 2 stun counters on it. So it clears the way to then create its own card advantage. This card is very pushed.
Yeah, so the first couple of times I played against that, I went, this is kind of cute. This is cool. But the hexproof is, quite frankly, some bullshit. Like, you're just like, okay, it's a creature. I can answer it with my... Oh no. Okay, I'm going to play out a creature to attack it, double stun counter. It is very good at defending itself. And the fact that it plays so well with like 0/3 flyer Tameo or a Bowmaster that you might want to recast anyway to get another trigger, I have been more and more impressed by Kaito over time.
I feel like the Ninjas decks that used to exist a couple years ago kind of just became Dimir Tempo, because why would you want to play with Ornithopter or whatever that changeling was for 1 black that I can't think of the name?
Changeling Outcast.
There we go. When you have Tameo Inquisitive Student, Orcish Bowmasters, Baleful Strix, even something like a Brazen Borrower. Like, why would you want to be playing Ornithopter when you have this insane card quality that you could play instead? And I'm sure I'm upsetting some Ninjas enthusiasts, and I'm kind of glad Brian isn't here for this, but I just think, why would you choose to do that when Tameo exists?
You also just have, like, Barrogoyf, so, like, you get to play Kaito and that. So you have a bunch, like, if you wanted, probably like 2 Kaitos, 4 Goyfs, just like 6 things at 3 mana that give you card advantage every time they hit. You support it with a bunch of generic counter spells and discard and removal. Like, that's a deck. That's a whole ass deck right there without needing to play your enablers, without needing to play Retrofitter Foundry, without needing to make your mana worse by jamming in Urza's Saga to find Retrofitter Foundry, Currency Converter, whatever it is that you're messing around with in that package.
I am so glad Brian isn't here today. I'm just going to say that one more time. I feel like he would not be happy with this conversation.
I don't know. Maybe he will just agree that the good cards are good.
Next time on the Eternal Glory podcast.
Bryant, I'm going to let you take the lead on this next one because I needed to look this one up. I have never played against this card, I don't think.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, neither have I, but I'll read it for everyone. This must be one that Brian really enjoyed. Storm Chaser's Talent. So it's a saga for 1 blue. When this enters, create a 1/1 blue and red otter token with prowess. For 4 mana, 3 and a blue, level up to Chapter 2. When this becomes level 2, return target instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. For 5 and a blue, so 6 mana total, level 3, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature with prowess. So, like that first ability, but now with every spell, you create another otter. So this seems like a Bryant Cook card. I can see why you thought that I would play this, Phil, but I have not seen it myself.
Okay, so I'm at least familiar with the theory. This is a air quotes combo with an uncommon from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. This town ain't big enough. So this is 4 and a blue for an instant, but it costs 3 less if it targets a permanent you control. So you return up to 2 target non-land permanents to their owner's hand. So the idea is you play your Storm Chaser's talent. You can end up leveling that up to return this town ain't big enough to your hand. You can then use that to bounce one of your opponent's permanents and the Storm Chaser's talent. And then you can replay the Storm Chaser's talent to just kind of have a slow loop that can give you otters while bouncing your opponent's big things that they're tapping out for. And if you are doing this while you have something like Up the Beanstalk, every time that you cast that air quotes 5 mana card, you are drawing an extra card.
Okay, that was a lot of information. My thought went to, okay, so you have roughly infinite mana, and this is what you're choosing to do. I mean, if you have 8 mana every turn, and you're not using it some way, I guess this is good. I mean, I'm sure it's probably fine in like an Up the Beanstalk deck. I'm just questioning if it's actually better than just like slamming an Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath or doing literally anything else.
All right, we're gonna do the test here. We're going to see if this actually has any tournament results to its name. MTG Top 8 search. Here we go. Storm Chaser's talent. Okay, there are a few results. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, 12 results for Storm Chaser's talent, including 5 of those results being 2-star things or higher.
The more you know.
Maybe Brian is ahead of the curve on this one. Maybe Brian knows.
If only he were here.
All right, let's talk about one that I am quite familiar with, Stock Up. The literal price on this card is kind of ticking up and up and up. And as far as Aether Drift goes, this is now probably one of the best cards from the set, as well as the literal third most valuable card in the set after Ketramos and the Aether Spark.
I do have a friend that was very upset that they played in a pre-release and ended up throwing out all their cards because they were like, none of these are worth anything. And they're like, in hindsight, I had double Stock Up that are now worth like $8.50 each or something. I don't actually know the exact price.
It's like $11.
Okay. I mean, Phil, I bought my Japanese foils for 50 cents each on release day. I was like, yeah, I think this card's good. I was like, it's like Pieces of the Puzzle, but better. I was right.
So obviously this has been great in the blue Ancient Tomb decks, be that Painter or 8-cast or some combination of those two decks, the show and tell decks. But now I have just seen it as just straight up some fair blue deck plays a couple of stock ups at the top end of their curve just as a refuel card.
Yeah, I mean, the card's incredibly good. So it really depends on what you're doing. If you're like Jeskai control, I think that something like Days Undoing still gets the nod because of the synergy with Narset Parter avails. But Phil, like you, I have seen it in the top end of some other strategies that are just like generic 4-color control piles, where they're like, I just want to grab my Leyline Binding or another Swords to Plowshares or whatever.
Okay, I'm gonna push back for once. So I think this is conceptually very good in Jeskai. The Jeskai lists are often very win condition light, looking to ride a couple copies of some Haymaker to victory. Fourth Air Lingas, for example. It used to be Entreat the Angels. Sometimes it's Triumph of St. Catherine or whatever. And Stock Up is another thing that lets you dig for the specific win conditions that you need. While at endgame, you fetch, you bring it back with Mystic Sanctuary, like we used to do with EI, and you can minus your Tamiyo to get your stock ups back, and that is an absurd amount of value. I actually think I like this in a Jeskai control deck.
Well, Phil, what you're saying makes sense to me. The problem is that the Jeskai decks aren't playing it, and that's what I was going off of. They are still playing Narset Days Undoing, but I'm with you. Like, I love Stock Up. Like, maybe the Jeskai deck should try it. But what I am noticing looking through lists is more of them are becoming more and more creature-based. I'm seeing Tamiyo Inquisitive Student, Snapcaster Mage, Thundertrap Trainer, main deck copies of Magus of the Moon. So these blue decks are going more creature heavy, and I'm seeing 2 to 3 copies of Fourth Erlingas. So it looks like they're accepting the fact that they need to win the game and not just control you and hope that you get bored.
Main deck Magus of the Moon is spicy.
Yeah, and I think a big thing when we talk about this is Tamiyo is a wizard, Snapcaster Mage is notably a wizard, Thundertrap Trainer, wizard, Magus of the Moon. Fun fact, wizard. All of those things matter for Flame of Anor, which cares about wizard count. So you get a pseudo stock-up card that's also removal or artifact destruction. And I think that's honestly pretty cool. So the Jeskai decks are starting to adapt to more copies of Flame of Anor, which kind of competes with the stock-up slot.
One of the things I do like from these Jeskai lists is that, like, Wrath of the Skies can be such an absolute beating. Sometimes you just need something that takes out everything that your opponent has done. And as a reminder, Wrath of the Skies destroys artifacts, creatures, and enchantments with mana value less than or equal to the amount of energy paid for its X cost. And against opposing Tamiyos, you can cast a Wrath of the Skies, get rid of the Tamiyo, and then get rid of all of the clues that she has built up as well.
Yeah, for sure. So when Wrath of the Skies first hit the format, we were all like, ooh, a clean answer to Urza Saga. And I thought to myself, I haven't seen Urza Saga in a while, so I decided to check the front page of Goldfish. There's 2 out of 15 decks that play it. So you have your Mono Blue Painter, the notable Urza Saga deck that is, at the 30-day look, the 6th most popular deck. At the 7-day look, it is almost falling off the page. So it is a deck that is trending downward. But the other deck that plays it would be Cephalid Breakfast, and I've noticed that decks are trimming on Sagas. 3's pretty standard, but I've seen some of them even go down to 2. It's just that Urza Saga constructs have never been worse than Legacy. And I think people went from Saga constructs being almost a primary game plan to recognizing they're not good enough, and now you have to have a broken artifact to get with it that makes sense with your deck in order for it to be playable.
Yeah, I play a lot of Urza Saga. I love me some Ancient Tombs, but there are now just some creatures in Legacy, Barrogoyf in particular, that just like invalidate your Urza Saga tokens. Like the Goyf is often larger than what you are doing with your constructs unless you are on an unfair draw. And it just gets to attack into you, or you try to double block, and then they set up a removal spell, and it just kind of leaves you in a really bad position. I have lost a lot of games with multiple Urza Saga tokens in play recently.
Yeah, it's a sad day to be a construct gamer. I mean, it's still nice if you can find your grindstone or whatever. It's just I don't think that constructs are a great primary plan anymore. So I've played a lot of the Black Saga Storm deck, because people like that it exists in Legacy as a budget storm option. But every time I play it, I just, like, by the end of the video, I'm just like, Urza Saga was terrible. Like, I don't know why I keep on doing this to myself. But a card that I'm more excited to talk about in a budget storm option is Will of the Jeskai. So granted, this came in a Commander supplementary set that came through Standard, but I recently played this card in Legacy Ruby Storm. And if you're unfamiliar with Will of the Jeskai, I will read it to you.
I've got it up. I'll do it. So, 3 in a red. Choose one. If you control a commander as you cast this spell, you may choose both instead. We're not going to do that. 1. Each player may discard their hand and draw 5 cards. 2. Each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until the end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost.
So this is a hybrid Wheel of Fortune / Past in Flames. The first thing to note is that each player may discard their hand and draw 5. So I had it come up in a video where I was actually facing the Thassa's Oracle Shift deck, and a ton of comments were, you could have made them draw their entire deck, but instead you chose Past in Flames. No, it's a May. That's not how that card works. So yeah, it's a partial wheel against Leyline of the Void, which came up a lot in my video. So if Past in Flames wasn't good enough, I just drew 5. And I think that was the big level up here. Yeah, this card doesn't have flashback itself, but I never needed it to. It was either deterministic win with giving everything in my graveyard flashback, or it was a wheel that reset me. And I actually faced Brian in that video, and Will of the Just guy looked incredible. So if you're looking for a budget storm option, this card just pushed Ruby Storm very hard.
So I personally was more excited about the big dumb 7-drop than the combo card. I have played with and against Ugin, Eye of the Storms. This is a very real Magic the Gathering card, especially in Modern. So 7-drop, 7 loyalty Planeswalker. When you cast it, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colors. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colors. It's got a +2 to gain 3 life and draw a card, a 0 to add 3 colorless mana, or a -11 that effectively is win the game because you search your library for any number of colorless non-land cards, exile them, shuffle, and you can cast them without paying their mana costs.
I actually played the colorless Mystic Forge combo deck with this in it. I did get to, well, I would have gotten to Ultimate the Ugin if my opponent just didn't snap concede, but I got there. Like, I hit the 12 counters, I was going to do the thing, and then the opponent was like, oh no, Bryant, you don't get to do that. So I did get to, get up there, but it just stabilized me, which I thought was incredible. So all of those Delver threats, you cast a bunch of cheap colorless spells, it exiles them, but the stability of gain 3 life draw card when you're a 1-ring deck with Ancient Tomb was quite good. And I think that's something people don't value enough is in this Ancient Tomb strategy that also plays the 1-ring, your life total gets low very quickly, and Ugin just goes, nah, dude, I got you. That part was so incredible. I never even used the 0 mana ability.
Yeah, so you cast it, it takes something out, it resolves, you play a Mox Opal or a Bauble or a Talisman or whatever, and you get to take another permanent immediately, and you get to draw like a card while gaining 3 life. That card might be a colorless card. This takes over a game very, very quickly, no matter what the board looks like on the other side. It's also effectively at 9 starting loyalty after it pluses. That is hard for a fair deck to gun down, especially if you take out 1 or 2 threats the turn that you play it.
A funny anecdote from that league, Phil, is I thought I was like giggling to myself on camera because I resolved it against Enchantress. And I was like, what are they going to do? I have an Ugin. I'm going to exile everything they do for the rest of the game. Nice basic planes. And then they played Ossification, I believe it's called, which exiles a Planeswalker. And I was just like, what? What? Why would you have this? Turns out they had it for Karn the Great Creator. But I was so sad that my Ugin got exiled. I was like so happy that I was going to exile their entire world. And that did not get to happen.
Call an ambulance, but not for me.
Womp womp. In general, I did feel like the Mystic Forge deck after losing Vexing Bauble was not super impressive, but the games in which I cast Ugin, I won. So the deck itself, I think, is not in a great position. Ugin was very powerful.
Yeah, so this is actually going to transition into the next card I wanted to talk about. Vexing Bauble kind of broke Magic, or at least broke Legacy, because it stopped the normal rules of engagement of counterspells are allowed to counter things. And Voice of Victory has been doing the same thing in some of the decks that I have been playing. I'll go ahead and read this one. So it's 1 and a white for a 1/3 human bard. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. And it's got Mobilize 2, meaning whenever it attacks, you make 2 tapped and attacking 1/1 red warrior creature tokens that you have to sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So you can use this to protect a combo if you are playing a deck like Doomsday or Cephalid Breakfast. Or you can use this to resolve a card that's more expensive than what you should be casting in Legacy. Like use this to resolve your Seasoned Dungeoneers, for example, which are notoriously bad versus cards like Daze. Or you just play it in an aggressive deck that has a ton of scary 2-drops, and you are forced to, hey, do I answer the Scythecat Cub that is going to kill me? More on that card in a second. Or the Voice of Victory, which is stopping all of my counter spells.
And here I thought this card was just a CDH card, Phil. I'm joking. I know that we talked about it a little bit in the pre-show, but this card is fairly good. I am a believer. When I bought my cards from this set, I did buy at least one copy of Voice of Victory because I do think that it's playable.
Yeah, I think we're very early on in seeing what this card is capable of doing. But I have played, I think, some red-white energy stuff and some green-white energy stuff that have messed around with this card, and it has felt impressive. This is one of those, like, this is now on my radar during deck building level of cards.
Before we talk about the Scythe-Cath Cub, I would like to talk about one more card, but it's not necessarily for Legacy, although I have played it there. The Stormscale Scion. So in Legacy, I think there's probably just better things you can be doing. Like, yeah, you can Seething Song into the Stormscale Scion, but the thing about Legacy is sometimes what your opponents are doing are just, it's so much better than like a handful of flying dragons, right? Like your opponent could just go, all right, Omniscience, kill you, or Oops, kill you. Doomsday, Thassa's Oracle, whatever, Cephalid Breakfast, like just making a large amount of creatures and passing doesn't feel very good. But in Modern, it beats Orm's Chant, it beats Damping Sphere, and unlike Ave Progenitor Ooze, which is a card that's honestly pretty similar, it's a large creature that then makes copies of itself, it blocks flyers. So it blocks Murktide Regent, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Tameo Inquisitive Student, and that's the big level up, because in the past I would play an Ave Progenitor Ooze, and then my opponent would just fly over with a Delver Secrets and kill me. That doesn't happen anymore with the Stormscale Scion, and that's the biggest level up that I don't see anyone talking about. So, is there room to push this in Legacy? Yeah, I think so, because I'm just so impressed by it within Modern that I think maybe I should reevaluate what I'm doing in Legacy to make this card work. And that brings me to a point that I would like to talk about. There's a natural tension with Rail Monsoon Mage. So you want your decks to be full of instant and sorcery spells for the Rail Monsoon Mage so that way you can trigger it in order to flip it. But then the back of Rail Monsoon Mage, when you ultimate, it cares about instant and sorceries. So a lot of people, including myself, are like, I don't want to play anything that doesn't trigger my Rail Monsoon Mage. Because you don't want to ultimate and then flip a Stormscale Scion and it's just exiled forever and you never get to use it. But if you rearrange how your deck is built to be less rail focused, you now get a large dragon, but there is the problem that you just have to live. So if the Legacy metagame gets a little bit more fair, I could see shifting Ruby Storm to just be a like turbo Stormscale Scion deck, but it would require a metagame shift.
Yeah, you probably don't need a very high storm count to make that a decent play, right? Like, is this just fine if you like writ play this? Like, is that enough to get across the finish line?
Yeah, that's 18 damage. In Modern, I literally just went like Manamorphose Ritual Dragon, and my opponent had an Orm's Chant in their hand. They were just like, oops. Like, they're like, oh, I guess I should have used this. Like, they were expecting me to go deeper, and I was like, nah, just Flying Dragons, 18 power, go. So I think there is room for this card in Legacy. It's just maybe not right in current Legacy, maybe a little bit down the road.
So it goes in the storm box of playables we revisit. I got it.
Exactly.
All right. And the last card that we want to talk about today is Scythe-Cat Cub. This is very, very similar to Bristly Bill, which had already been seeing some play.
Love William.
I think that one was from the Fallout set. Scythe-Cat Cub is from Foundation Jumpstarts. So this is another one of those, sir, technically that was not a standard legal card, but it was from Foundation. So let's talk about it. So 2/2 Trample Landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, you double the number of +1/+1 counters on that creature instead. Now, people have been playing this card a couple of different ways. You can just play this in a straight up aggro deck, like something like an energy deck, or a deck that has like Elvish Reclaimers and Quirion Rangers and wants to do land-oriented things. And if you have a fetch land over the course of a couple of turns, like if you play this and then next turn you go fetch land, you put a counter, you double the counters, there's 2 counters on it. Well, the following turn, you play a land, 3 counters on it, fetch, double to 6 counters on it. This gets very scary. And if you play Scythe-Cat Cubs in multiples, where you stack the triggers so that you put the counters on, and then you double it, and then double it again, it can be very close to a one-hit KO in a single combat step.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good to me.
And you can also just like use it to target your Nadus and get your value that way while creating gargantuan sized creatures.
I have seen it in the Cradle Control deck. The thing is, I'm someone who only plays combo. So this card across the table from me, I'm like, phew, that's not something that kills me or interacts. Like, I'm good. But I believe what you're saying. It all makes sense. It's just I don't have that first world experience.
Yeah, when you are trying to play fair, this thing on the other side of the table is scary. But yeah, if you are, casting your Doomsdays and you're going to win that turn, yeah, don't worry about this. If you're going to cast your Doomsday and you're going to pass the turn, though, like, hope you didn't put Street Race in that pile.
Speaking of Doomsday, I know we're trying to wrap this up, Phil, but this is the first time in years since I can remember that Doomsday is not on the front page of MTG Goldfish. And if you have to expand to the second page and then keep scrolling down. It's next to Goblins. Like, it's 1.3% of the format. Like, Doomsday has taken a hit. Like, it's next to, and I quote, Ocelot Pride midrange. So that would be Boros Energy and Legacy and Jund. Lands is above Doomsday. Like, the Doomsday players are not putting up results right now. So it's kind of crazy that Doomsday's taken such a fall from grace, because it's a deck that I love and I enjoy recording with, but it doesn't seem incredibly positioned in the 20% tempo format or the Oops All Spells Dimir Reanimator format.
Oof. I did not realize it had fallen that far. Wow. All right, Bryant, do you have any words of wisdom for us to round out the show?
Contact your local congressman. Let's get Oops All Spells banned.